something that has bothered me for years, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was that was bothering me about it was several years ago. I was in a conversation with a friend of mine back then. I haven't spoken to this person in literally years, but we were talking about the band Mercy Me. They had just barely kind of made the big splash. I could only imagine the song, like the chart-topping hit, had just come out, and so they were the band. Them, and then I guess in that same sphere at that time would have been like Casting Crowns and Big Daddy Weave, maybe. Like they were the ones that every dad at a church was trying to get their youth aged children into listening to. But anyway, talking about Bart Millard is the name of the lead singer from Mercy Me, the author of the song I Could Only Imagine, and how I remember that it was just kind of an offhand comment made about how Bart Millard had the opportunity to go pro in the NFL, to go into the draft, be drafted into the NFL as I think it was like a left guard or something of that nature. Like he's a bigger dude. I don't know if you've seen him or not, but he's a bigger guy, and he usually has like a longer goatee kind of thing happen on, as well as like a bald head. And I remember this dad-aged guy that I knew. He was like, he had the chance to go into the NFL, and he chose not to. Instead, chose to pursue his musical career, musical talents instead. And this is the part that bothered me. And obviously, it paid off for him, or that we can see the fruit of the decision that he made. And like I said, this is years ago. I didn't have the theological kind of panacea that I have now. I didn't have the philosophical footing that I have now. But it bothered me even then. There was something weird that happened deep inside of me of, I don't know. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but it just recently dawned on me what it was. And it's because someone mentioned that there's a movie made with the title of that song that's supposed to be like about his backstory. And this is the thing that bothered me. The reason that it's considered that it was a good, wise, beneficial decision for Bart Millard to pursue his musical career instead of his professional athletic career was that he's successful. That's the distinction. That is the reason why this person saw a benefit to him deciding to become a professional artist, performance artist, rather than an athlete. That's the difference. And that's bothered me. And I remember about something that I've heard a lot, repeated a lot, is a quote from John Piper of if if Satan offered all of the material gain that the world idolizes, maybe we should, as a church, as Christians, stop considering success in worldly metrics to be success in God's kingdom. And I'm free-handing that quote, but that's the essence of it, of the idea that we have the tendency to measure a Christian leader, a Christian influencer, a pastor or a deacon or whoever you happen to be, an author, by book sales, by butts and seats, by building size, by budget room, by these sort of things, rather than measuring them on the basis of far more biblically consistent metrics. And what I mean by that is Jesus, at the time of his death, had at most a handful of faithful, loyal followers. You have John, who was there at the foot of the cross, his mother, the other Mary, Mary Magdalene, Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus. That's it. All of the other disciples. Peter, who was supposed to be the leader among men for these people, has denied him 3 times. Judas, who was the treasurer of his discipleship group, had betrayed him and killed himself. Like, if we were going to measure the effectiveness of Christ's ministry prior to death, we would have considered him a failure. And another kind of golden boy, if you want to call him that, someone that gets quoted a lot in Christian circles, is a man named Jim Elliot and his kind of compatriot Nate Saint. They went down into the Amazon with the idea that they were going to minister to, missionize this isolated group, tribe of individuals, and they ended up simply getting murdered. They had 0 converts while they were alive. Their families, their wives and children, took up the banner of their cause, and that entire tribe ended up coming to faith. But by a worldly standard, their life was wasted. They died in the prime of youth. They left behind a wife and children. They were failures. But in the eyes of God, they were the sterling representatives of what it means to live out the mission of Christ. This is kind of the thing that I'm pointing out. Christians love to quote them, but Christians rarely, if ever, want to live like them. Another example of this would be George Muller. He was the director of an orphanage in England, and his thing was that they didn't receive donations, at least not in an official capacity. They wouldn't receive monetary care or assistance. They lived hand to mouth, and he had a massive orphanage, some like 20, 50 kids at different times, and every morning they would dress themselves, they would get ready, and they would go to a table, and they would sit with empty plates and their silverware beside them, and they would pray. And once they had finished praying, every single day, they would hear a thump, essentially, and then they would go to their porch, and there would be just enough groceries for them to be able to feed for that day. They lived off the manna from heaven, faithfully and gratefully, and that was it. Nothing special to it, no sort of formula. They lived being cared for directly by heaven's angels. And I'm sure there were humans involved, just none that came forward and took credit, and none that made themselves aware. But because of it, they experienced a caring by God that I don't think any of us would appreciate as much as they did. And I've lived in a similar situation. I've had difficulty like that where God has had to provide for us in a unique way, in a supernatural way, and whereas it was good for my faith, it was difficult. And it's one of those things that I wouldn't ask for it, but I am grateful for it. And I wonder if more Christians wouldn't have far less struggles. Emotional health, mental health, depression, anxiety. If they would have less of these things, badgering them if they chose to live in a fashion in which God had to demonstrate his intimate care for them rather than them constantly trying to take it into their own hands. Something to think about.